Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is a Friday episode of the Utopia Football Podcast, practice number 2 in the books out at NRG Stadium today for the Texans and training camp. Another mild weather day out there, thanks to the weather gods. Mother Nature, we appreciate you. You're doing a hell of a job this week, Mother Nature. Another day in the low 80s out there at training camp. Just a very unusual and surreal situation. Even more surreal than having Stephon Diggs, Danielle Hunter, and Joe Mixon on the Texans is the fact that the Texans in the middle of July are practicing in very, very pleasant climates. So we've got you covered on that, as we do for all the Texans training camp practices. Episodes following each practice just off the field within the last hour or so. And here we go. I'm Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. weekdays. You can get us on the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcasts. Certainly the podcast of the show is out there. Quick reminder, we're going to have Nick Caserio on with us on Wednesday this week at 7:30 a.m. on Sports Radio 610. So make a note of that. That is confirmed. I talked to Nick briefly out at camp today, and he's raring to go, ready to go next Wednesday for you, the Sports Radio 610 listeners. Of course, for this podcast, if you're already subscribed, I love you for that. Appreciate you. If you want to rate and review the podcast, feel free to do that. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you're finding the podcast, you're digging it, you're liking getting these updates, I like to give you the updates of what is happening out there. There's a lot of places you can go get that. I do like to inject some of my opinion on it as well and give you my analysis on what we're seeing out there. So trying to be, a little unique out there in the sea of content that is out there, the growing sea of content for Texan fans, because the Texans are a damn good football team and more people wanting to consume. So we will hit the practice report from today in just a second. Again, a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast, hit that subscribe button. Also on Tuesday this week, there will be 2 episodes on Tuesday, a practice report, because there is practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And there will be a mailbag episode as well. So send me your questions. Anything about training camp is fair game. If I know it, if I see it, if I have an opinion on it, send it in. I'll answer it. houmailbag@gmail.com. houmailbag@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into today's practice report. I would say let's start off with this. We got our first look at not necessarily how the new kickoff rules are going to look like in a game or what they're going to look like in a game. They didn't line up 11 on 11 and practice the new kickoff rules. And I guess I'm just going to give a very broad, for those who aren't totally familiar with the new kickoff rules, starting this season, the kickoffs are still going to take place where they always did, but the kicker is going to be very lonely because the rest of the coverage team, the other 10 guys on the coverage team, are all going to be lined up deep in enemy territory, 5 yards facing the blocking wall of the return team. And most teams will have 2 returners back there and 9 guys blocking. And the kickoffs, the play will not start until the returner touches the actual kickoff. And then it really, if you go watch any of the videos of what these new kickoff returns look like, there should be a lot more returns. It's much more punitive or it's at least more punitive to kick the ball out the back of the end zone, whereas that used to be come out to the 25-yard line. A touchback in that case would come out to the 30-yard line. There's serious penalties for not kicking the ball, for coming short of the landing area where most of the kicks are expected to be fielded. And there will be no onside kicks, no surprise onside kicks. There will be onside kicks, but you're going to line up where you usually do and then go execute that. So no more surprise onside kicks. Sorry, Sean Payton. We know you love to do that. So anyways, we got our first look at some of the drills they're running to prep the Texans for the new kickoff rules. And right now it looks like it is wide open as to who might be returning kicks for this football team. Now, keep in mind, the way that the coverage team is lined up deep in enemy territory and just 5 yards away from the 9 blockers for the returners is really going to turn this kickoff return into a play that looks a lot more like a play at the line of scrimmage. The goal of this new kickoff rule is to eradicate the game of guys having to run 100 miles an hour down the field, 50 yards, throwing themselves into other guys. This is where a lot of really serious injuries, concussions, we've seen some serious head and neck injuries through the years take place on kickoffs. This is designed to make the kickoff a whole lot more safe and prevent injury, but it's going to look so different. And all these teams right now are basically, when they're running their special team stuff at these training camp practices, it's a petri dish. We have no idea what to expect. They ran with this in the XFL, I believe, this kickoff rule, the XFL or the USFL, maybe both of them. So I've seen some of the plays there, on YouTube from those leagues, but I don't know what to expect yet at the NFL level with this. As far as the Texans go, and I'm going to shout out Landry Locker here, my colleague in covering the Texans. And of course, you can get his YouTube channel, The Locker Room, does a great job covering the Texans. He sent me the list here and I was there. I just didn't write the list down, but he sent me the list. These are all the guys they had in the kickoff return line, the Texans: Steven Sims, Dameon Pierce, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, the rookie Jawar Jordan, Desmond King, J.J. Taylor, Miles Bryant, Nico Collins, and John Mechie. The first 6 on that list are the ones that are probably more likely to be there. They had them lined up in pairs, and they participated in all the drills when it came to working on the new kickoff rules in the return. It looks like right now, if they had to start the season, Steven Sims and Desmond King would be the top kick returners. They were with the 1s, Pierce and Dell with the 2s, and then Jordan and J.J. Taylor with the 3s. But it was crazy. They were running drills for these return guys where the one of the assistant coaches would literally throw a line drive, like a ground ball, like infield practice almost, but with the football. And guys were having to field bouncing balls to them, because I think the thought process is that there may be a lot of teams that choose to kind of dirty kick the thing down low and roll it and squib it and see if they can get some chicanery going on with the return game by doing it that way. I've never seen a team drill that before. Drill literally like fielding ground ball kickoffs. So they were doing that. That was very strange. They had a separate group of players from the return guys working on blocking in this new kickoff. A litany of guys that have running back / linebacker type bodies. Not a lot of big heavies out there, but a lot of the kind of those mid-sized safety linebacker types. And they were working on blocking it. And it's going to look so different. Myself, I would not mind seeing Tank Dell back there returning kicks. Tank Dell or Dameon Pierce did a good job last year. I don't know if he would be the guy back there this year. I think it would be really interesting to see Tank Dell back there. Tank is also right in the mix now to return punts as well. I don't know how people feel about that. But so I say all this to say that special teams is kind of chaos right now when it comes to this kickoff return. And I think it could look chaotic when the season rolls around. I don't know what to expect in terms of how does it affect scoring? Is the kickoff return, is scoring on a kickoff return going to all of a sudden become way more frequent than it used to be? Last season, I think there were only 3 or 4 kickoff returns for a touchdown. 2 of them were by Texans, Andrew Beck and Dameon Pierce. So I don't know what to expect. If this turns into a play where scoring is way more frequent, I think you could see teams just saying, screw it, and kicking it out of the back of the end zone and saying, okay, we'll just give it to you at the 30, whereas, last year and in previous years, you kick it out the back of the end zone, it goes to the 25. I don't know if 5 yards is punitive enough where if this play becomes super dangerous for return teams, that teams don't just, figuratively punt on it and say, fine, take it at the 30. We don't need all this. We don't need the headache of guys like Tank Dell breaking off big returns. So we got our first look at drills to begin to get their tactics in place for the kickoffs today. Very interesting. And I'll say this, and this is going to be the last thing I say about the kickoffs on this episode. If there are glitches in the matrix, if there are little loopholes here with these new rules that teams can take advantage of, I trust that we've got the right brain power in the building with the Texans to do that. Frank Ross is an excellent special teams coach. D'Amico Ryans is a very intelligent head coach. And I think even Nick Casario's input as well would factor into something like that. And obviously, I think very highly of Nick too. So I feel really good about these new rules because the Texans have a coaching staff in place that I think is very adaptable to things like this. So we got our first look at that. Second thing on the bullet points right next to me here, if you're watching on the stream on YouTube, it says imported leadership. And yesterday I talked about Stephon Diggs and the Diggs effect and the effect that, according to not Diggs himself, but Tank Dell today in a press conference. Nico Collins yesterday, D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio. Stephon Diggs has been a really, really nice injection of leadership in that wide receiver room. Not that it needed, not that it was running, it was everything's running amok and we must get a leader in here. Robert Woods was that guy last year. He's still here. But that Stephon Diggs has been really the polar opposite of how a lot of people have painted Stephon Diggs. He's really been helpful with guys like Tank Dell, Nico Collins, John Mechie as well. But today we got to hear from two of the other imported leaders. Danielle Hunter, defensive end, who has been a great addition for Will Anderson. Will met with the media yesterday and said as much. And then Joe Mixon we got to hear from today as well. And he's really excited about providing leadership to that young running back room. It seems like all these guys they brought in have guys that are amenable to mentoring and have guys that, if mentored properly, they can really take that next step. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, specifically in the wide receiver room. I think Danielle Hunter and what he can provide for Will Anderson could be invaluable. And then Dameon Pierce could use a Joe Mixon. There's just no doubt about it. So Mixon and Hunter both met with the media today. And so we got a further feel for what they're all about. We've been able to observe and see them interacting with their teammates, giving them little tips here and there. So that's been really cool to see. I think the other thing that's really cool to see with Hunter and Mixon, both of them in their press conferences today expressed incredible, I don't know if gratitude's the right word, enthusiasm is definitely the right word, for how they will be used in their respective schemes defensively and offensively. Danielle Hunter said that the schemes he'd played in the past had him reading defenses, which is not nearly as much fun as just lining up and chasing the quarterback for Danielle Hunter. That's what D'Amico wants him to do. D'Amico wants him to, quote, just go and get the quarterback. Danielle Hunter is not an excitable guy. He's a very monotone personality. He kind of lit up, at least by Danielle Hunter standards, when he was talking about that in his media session earlier today. Joe Mixon similarly was asked about the scheme he's playing and what they're asking him to do. The original question when he gave this answer was about older running backs and the narrative that older running backs maybe don't have as much in the tank or aren't worth the money, whatever the case may be. Joe Mixon literally said that this is going to be night and day compared to how he was in Cincinnati. And throughout his media session today, was very excited and enthusiastic about playing with C.J. Stroud, the ability of this wide receiving core to open things up for him and vice versa. So to me, it's not just that the Texans, and I'm just going to focus in on Hunter, Mixon, and Diggs because those are the three biggest names. It's not just that they brought in great football players. They brought in guys that are going to provide tremendous value to those rooms. The Texans have been trying to bring in guys like that for the last few years. The problem was it was guys like Christian Kirksey and Chris Conley and Rex Burkhead, guys like that, guys that just were on their last legs hanging on to stay in the league. Man, when you're bringing in guys like this, like Danielle Hunter, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Pro Bowl caliber players, and they're providing that same leadership or maybe even better than those other guys that I just named, it's a complete home run. So that's been really cool to see these first 2 days, not only the leadership from those guys, but also the excitement that Hunter and Mixon specifically, we've not heard from Diggs yet in training camp, but Hunter and Mixon today, super excited to play in these schemes. The coaching staff of the Houston Texans is proving to be a big, big weapon. So I think that's another takeaway. So we got the new kickoff rules. We saw some of that today. So saw those drills. Hunter and Mixon, we got to hear from them, and the imported leadership has been such a home run for this team. As far as other observations and things going on at camp today, I've got a few plays that stuck out for me. Before I get to those, Christian Harris has not practiced the first couple days. He's not even been out at practice the first couple days. And for whatever reason, D'Amico Ryans has not been asked about that. I don't know why. At D'Amico's press conferences, I tend to lay back and let the beat writers get their questions in because they're the ones that are having to go write columns and things like that. But I'm surprised that nobody's asked about that yet. At least to my knowledge, they haven't. If they have, I apologize to the Houston Texans beat. But from my understanding, Christian Harris is whatever's going on with Christian Harris is not major. He is going to be back pretty soon. But I don't have any detail information. Just know that if you see stories or hear stories that Christian Harris hasn't been out of practice from the folks I've talked to, it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything that's, career threatening. Like it's nothing major. going on with Christian Harris. So we'll see. Maybe he's back tomorrow. The Texans, of course, practice Saturday, no practice Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. I would expect we're going to see some padded practices coming up, but no Christian Harris the first 2 practices. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. Laremy Tunsil out at practice again today, but didn't work out with the team. He worked out on a side field with some of the trainers and some of his lesser known teammates that are on the PUP list. So no Laremy Tunsil again today at practice. Again, it doesn't appear that this is anything we should be alarmed about. DeMeco Ryans said himself yesterday that everybody that's there is on track to be ready for the opener against the Indianapolis Colts. So, but no Laremy Tunsil practicing. As far as plays out of practice today that caught my eye, there was a play. CJ Stroud had a deep throw downfield into double coverage to Noah Brown. That one of the 2 guys in double coverage was inside linebacker Azeez Al-Shire running step for step with Noah Brown and helped make the play to knock the ball away. I thought that was pretty cool to see the athleticism from another imported leader for the Houston Texans. Maybe the one guy who's shown the most leadership traits so far of any of them has been Azeez Al-Shire. But it was cool to see him make a play in the passing game today, to see him in coverage against the wide receiver in Noah Brown. So that was cool to see. Dameon Pierce is running decisively, and I can't overstate how important that is to this team. I don't think their intent at all with Joe Mixon is to give him a bell cow workload where he's touching the ball 20 or 25 times a game. DeMeco Ryans has said he wants a 1-2 punch with Dameon Pierce and Joe Mixon. Pierce is running decisively. That was his issue last year. Too much pitter-patter of his feet, not enough planting his foot in the ground and finding the hole and going. So Dameon Pierce running decisively has been very big. He looked really good in team drills today. Davis Mills had a nice throw today to John Mechie, who has looked just as good so far in training camp as he did in minicamp and OTAs. I think Mechie is going to be a contributor to this team this year. Really nice, kind of classic Kubiak system play where, play action to one side, roll to the other, and John Mechie is open at that second level. Davis Mills had a couple of choices he could have gone to, chose to go to Mechie, who snatched the ball with his hands. Saw Jeff Okudah make a play as well, a nice PBU, a nice pass breakup for Jeff Okudah, who seems to be kind of trailing the cornerback competition right now. Jeff Okudah, the former 3rd overall pick out of Ohio State back in 2020. CJ Henderson, the 9th overall pick in that draft, also in this camp. He seemed to come into training camp maybe a little bit ahead of Okudah based on his performance in minicamp. Kamari Lassiter, the rookie from Georgia, might be ahead of both of them. But it was good to see Okudah make a play as well. So those are just a few of the plays that jumped out at me. The plays themselves are going to be, I think, more. There will be more of them to document when they put pads on. It's just with just jerseys and helmets on. There aren't as many substantive plays where you can really look at the blocking scheme and things like that and feel like, all right, they're getting it on one side of the ball or the other. So we'll have a whole lot more of that when the pads go on. So that's the update for today's practice. Again, if you want to send me an email, houmailbag@gmail.com, houmailbag@gmail.com, and be sure to hit subscribe for the podcast as well. So for Anthony Irwin, my producer, I'm Sean Pendergast. There is a practice tomorrow on Saturday. My intent is to record an episode for that practice as well. So subscribe. You'll get them all sent to wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Until then, have a great weekend. Enjoy your Friday, and we will see you tomorrow for practice report number 3.